P23. Knowledge, access, power. P23. Wellness and understanding at your fingertips. P23. And that's no cap.
Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying DNA, your go-to podcast for unraveling the mysteries of genetics and their profound influence on our lives. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Montgomery, scientist, epidemiologist, and just that curious lady, CEO of P23 Health. And today we are joined by a distinguished expert in the field, Dr. Paul Slowey. Dr. Slowey is the founder and CEO of Oasis Diagnostics, a company that specializes in non-invasive saliva testing for a variety of purposes, such as infectious diseases, genetics, nutrition, and more. He is also the co-founder of the North American Saliva Symposium, a member of the Oregon Bioscience Association and Life Science Washington, and an honorary visiting professor at Central South University in China. Dr. Slowey has over 32 years of experience in clinical diagnostics and pharmaceutical industries. He has published 45 articles. He has 15 patents, authored 7 chapters, and has 12 patent applications on various topics related to saliva science. He is widely recognized as a pioneer and a leader in the field of oral fluid diagnostics. He has been instrumental in developing and commercializing several saliva-based products and technologies, such as the OraQuick HIV test, the first over-the-counter HIV test in the U.S. He is a husband, a father, a grandfather, a friend, and a mentor. Dr. Slowey is a dear friend scientist of mine who has 4 children and almost 8 grandchildren. Dr. Slowey, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very, very honored to actually be part of this. Wanted to do this for a long time, so I'm really, really honored to be here.
We are thrilled to have you. We love talking science, and I love getting excited about something that's so dear to me. Not just science, not just genetics, but saliva. I love making it easy. So this is going to be great. In this episode, Unraveling the Secrets, Cancer and Genetics in Saliva-Based Testing, we will focus on early detection through saliva-based testing, where we'll delve into the fascinating world of non-invasive diagnostics tools and their transformative role in early cancer detection. From the power of saliva and disease screening to the latest breakthroughs in cancer genetics, buckle up for an exciting discussion that could alter your perception of disease prevention. Let's kickstart this riveting conversation, Dr. Slowey. So we talked about the power of saliva. I want you're basically like the godfather of saliva.
No, I'm not the godfather. I'm still a pupil I have lots of excellent mentors that are right there as well. But I guess as far as the commercialization side and the applications for saliva, I'm kind of synonymous with that. So hopefully I can address some of the questions and, point you to some of the other leaders in the field that could be on a future one of these podcasts.
This is exciting. So when we talk about the power of saliva, why do you think it's such a revolutionary tool for disease detection?
But, we've been in this business, or myself have been in this business for 30 years with OraSure Saliva Diagnostic Systems, and then my own company for the last 21 years. And, if you look back in history, Epitope became OraSure in, I think it was 1999 or probably 2000. And saliva at that time was pretty much an uphill push. And I think the reasons that I can look back on and say why that's the case is that, saliva is typically present in, the biomarkers that you're looking for in saliva, whether they be DNA, protein, RNA. They're usually present in smaller quantities. For instance, I think HIV is like 1,400 times lower HIV antibodies in saliva than in blood. However, nowadays we have the much more sensitive technologies that can actually detect those biomarkers. So, in proteins, for instance, you've got mass spectrometry, very, very high resolution mass spec. You've got next generation sequencing. You've got lateral flow that can use fluorescence-based particles instead of, colloidal gold. So you can actually get down to much lower levels and lower limits of detection. So I think that, and put together that with the 23andMe's of this world, the Ancestry.com, and then the advent of COVID, where saliva became kind of the mainstay, if you like, for sampling. I think those things have really pushed saliva forward, and it's really an exciting time to be in the saliva world, to be honest.
Now, when you think about what we're able to detect in saliva, are there any doubts in your mind when it comes to the sensitivity or the accuracy of testing when you compare, say, a nasal swab or a blood sample to a saliva sample?
I think if you take each one in turn, there's cases for a swab test, there's cases for saliva. But I think if you look back and use the COVID pandemic as an example, when the shortage of swabs happened around about March 2020, and I talked to a very large company, a $25 billion company at the time, which shall remain nameless, but they had a back order of 37 million nasal swabs or nasopharyngeal swabs. We couldn't get swabs anywhere. And that's kind of the time when saliva became either the saliva was the tool of choice. But it took a little while. The first publications that came out were kind of iffy. But I think if you look back on the publications from now back to 2020, you'll see that probably saliva is now edged in front of nasopharyngeal swabs. And I can point to a study that was done in Europe on 11 different pathogens. And on day one, saliva and swab were basically equivalent in terms of sensitivity. But after day one, the saliva basically took over in terms of being a better and more sensitive tool for that particular, and it was multiple pathogens. It wasn't just COVID. It was RSV and flu A, flu B, etc. So, yeah, I think it's become a really, really good tool of choice. And, it's a good area to be in. And I'm really glad that you're in this area as well already.
Thank you. It is exciting. And I think that initially there were a lot of doubts. And one of the biggest problems that we faced were that the people who were doing the validations and who had the ability to really convince, instead of writing papers, we were doing the work. We were trying to get the EUAs. We were trying to educate our scientific community so more people could use the technology so that we be useful and helpful, especially with the shortage. And I think even internally, inside of the scientific community, it took some convincing between scientists to even get scientists to understand, hey, we can do this with something other than a nasal swab.
Well, I think the thing that makes me really excited, and typically you mentioned the North American Saliva Symposium. When we haven't had one since COVID started, but I intend to have one this year. But the goal of that was literally to bring together the commercial sector involved in saliva, like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, Thermo Fisher, etc., all these big companies, and then bring in the researchers that are developing the next biomarkers for diseases all over the place. At that particular meeting, as much as I'd love to talk about what I do, I don't talk very much. I introduce the subject. I spend 15 minutes introducing the field. And then, I go out on other meetings like that. There was a meeting in Australia recently called the SALSA meeting, which was Saliva Liquid Sampling Australia meeting in May. And I made I think it was a 30-minute presentation. I didn't talk about anything we did. All I wanted to talk about was the new applications that are so exciting. You can determine your biological age. You can detect pregnancy. There's a luminescence test for COVID. I mean, there's just, you name it. We're talking to people that are developing tests for congestive heart failure, that will detect for risk biomarkers for congestive heart failure and be able to tell you in 30 minutes that, you have a much higher risk. We provide devices to the Alzheimer's Association for ApoE genotyping that tells you whether you've got a higher risk of having Alzheimer's. And, my wife's father died of Alzheimer's, so we were very quick to have her tested. Fortunately, she doesn't have the ApoE4 gene. She's ApoE3, so she's at much lower risk than people who have the ApoE4 gene. So there's not many things that I can think of where, saliva is not going to play a role, to be honest.
And that's exciting. I think that you hit something that was key, because We have to make sure that we continue that education within our scientific community as well and really push and forge that innovation. I think for sure, we've talked about your symposium. I'm excited. P23 Labs and P23 Health will be attending.
Okay,
So
good.
I'm excited. I want you to bring that back. So keep us posted on that. With saliva, we talk about it a lot with infectious disease. We've talked about COVID and RSV. You've mentioned briefly the broad areas that it applies to, but I want you to tell me a little bit in particular how saliva will play a role with early cancer detection.
I think this is the thing that I am so excited about. And the reason is that I think we all know that when a tumor forms, circulating tumor DNA is kind of released into the bloodstream very quickly. And a lot of companies like Foundation Medicine, Guardant Health, and others have kind of picked up on that and developed cancer-based diagnostics based on a blood liquid biopsy, which, by the way, they like to call a non-invasive specimen, which kind of drives me up the wall because blood, in my opinion, was never in a non-invasive specimen. But that's a side subject. Companies like ours and others have developed what we call saliva liquid biopsy if quantities. So you may have to basically enrich the sample, but we have one application that's reported by the National Cancer Institute for lung cancer particularly, and with one drop of saliva in non-purified form, you don't even have to purify the saliva. Go straight on a machine. 30 minutes later, you can diagnose lung cancer, looking at a couple of mutations in the EGFR gene, one of which is the exon 19 deletion. The other is the L858R. And to me, that's just kind of the proof of concept for multiple cancer tests to be developed, providing that the biomarkers are available. And we're not a biomarker company. So, we literally provide tools that can collect saliva. We still need companies that have the biomarkers to basically partner with to bring these new applications to market. Yeah, and I forgot to mention, in this particular case, which is reported widely, it's been around for about 10 years, the correlation that you get between the saliva liquid biopsy specimen is actually better with tissue. Tissue obviously being the gold standard. The saliva sample is much more well correlated to tissue than blood or plasma. So, I mean, in this case, you're saying saliva is a better specimen. It's not just equivalent, it's even better.
That's impressive. Not just that it's a viable specimen, but that it's better because it correlates closer to the tissue.
That is correct.
And I think that's because saliva, it circulates, right? We have the proteins there. We have the circulating tumor DNA or ctDNA. We have metabolites. We have mRNA. And for us, we are looking at saliva to detect various types of cancer like oral, lung, breast, pancreatic, and prostate cancer, all using saliva. So I think it's important to educate not just consumers, not just health enthusiasts, but also other scientists about the possibilities and really help to get that research out so that it can be accepted, understood, and utilized. Because when you think about saliva-based testing and we go into the future of true non-invasive testing, not something that we're saying, oh, this is just a finger prick or it's just a little bit of blood. So, not the false definition, but if we're truly thinking about non-invasive diagnostics, where would you see the future taking us?
Well, I'm really excited by what you said there because, most of those tests that you're working on, for breast and prostate, the tests that are available are reasonable, but sometimes they're very poor. I mean, in the case of prostate cancer, PSA, I get my PSA tested twice a year. I have biopsy once a year. The tests are terrible, and we need something that's going to be an early detection tool for those people that currently don't have cancer but may well progress to cancer. So, I think you're exactly in the right realm, and saliva will play a big role in all of these particular cancers.
Not only that, but it gives us the opportunity to take the product global. Saliva can be inactivated. It's not as infectious as blood or tissue. It can be stabilized for a longer amount of time. We were looking at stability studies upwards to 30 days.
Right.
It really puts us in a position to break down those barriers, which include access to screening tools. So when you're thinking that, I know you work globally. Tell me how you think saliva will play in that global market.
One thing before we move on to that, because I think another area that we didn't mention is the area of exosomes, because exosomes literally are they're the carriers that carry everything around the system. And yeah, saliva is rich in exosomes, and we've done a lot of work on EVs ourselves and characterize some of the particle sizes that you get, size distribution, etc. So that's something we should add to our conversation. As far as global is concerned, when I was with OraSure, my role was basically international marketing manager. We launched OraQuick into South Africa in the year 2000, and I spent a lot of time in Uganda, Kenya, Egypt, in various other countries in Africa. Saliva, you can collect it anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. You can collect it, you can stabilize it. People, even in places like Africa, where they consider blood to be a taboo matrix, they don't want to give blood because it's considered to be part of their body. Like Jehovah's Witnesses here, they don't want to take a blood sample either. So in those cases, saliva is preferred specimen. And, when you show somebody they have a saliva collection kit that's going to collect saliva from them in a couple of minutes rather than sticking a needle in their arm, I mean, they just jump up and down and say, wonderful. Children as well, I mean, the devices that are available go down to, you can collect from 2-year-olds and above. So in maybe in Uganda, in the jungle areas and things like that, this is going to be ideal. And, you don't have to actually do the test there. As long as you can collect the specimen and stabilize it at the point of collection, then you get it back to the lab and you can process it in some of the main labs in the cities like Kampala and other cities like that.
So when you are talking about saliva collection devices, I know the one that I'm most familiar with is a sputum type device. You're going to exasperate or spit into the tube and stabilize it. Tell us about some different things you can do other than just spitting in a tube. How else can you collect saliva?
Okay, I mean, we have devices like that as well, and they can a little bit like the Origin device, which is probably the market leading product. You spit in the cup and you collect and stabilize it with a stabilizer. We have devices that collect DNA and proteins as well, but they kind of me too. There's other products out there like that. I think the thing that differentiates certain collections is that they have to be what collects a purified sample, and what I mean by that is you use some sort of absorbent material in the mouth that basically collects a sample and purifies the sample during the collection process. During that process as well, you've got sample indication, that tells you, look, I've got enough saliva here so that I can actually stop collecting, and now I can introduce it into a test, or I can squeeze it into a tube and then send it to a laboratory for testing at a later time. That's pretty critical when you're looking at things like saliva antigen tests for COVID and various other things. Samples that are maybe passive Joule samples are not really amenable to what I'd call lateral flow tests or point of care tests that look at, either antigens or antibodies in bodily fluids like saliva or urine or blood. So if you can purify the sample, you're going to have a much better chance of getting high sensitivity products from that. And that's kind of part of our rationale. And one of the reasons that we're doing quite well right now is that there are companies that are developing these types of tests that require some sort of upfront saliva collection and purification rather than just a sample collection.
So what you're talking about is actually purifying the sample
Correct.
At point of collection.
Yeah, and it could be what's considered a size exclusion type principle, but the materials will literally adhere what I call the mucinous material, all the thick gooey stuff in your saliva, that everything that you want to collect is still in the saliva. And, through publication, we've shown that these collection tools will actually give you an equivalent sample. All the proteins that you're looking for are still there in the same quantities that you're looking for. But the passive Joule sample is literally 45% lower in protein because they get bound up. The mucins get bound up on the collection tool. So it's a very neat way of cleaning up the sample and getting it ready for downstream analysis. And that could apply to all diagnostics, cancer diagnostics, hormone testing, all these types of things.
When you're talking about the future and where we're going, the technology that's out, what we can use it for, how we can take these devices and put them in the clinical setting. It's no secret how we met, right? Like how we really see the vision going. I mean, it's exciting. But I think that it's important to help our audience understand that the genetics of cancer and understanding the genetics of cancer has led us to this path of looking at the saliva to help us unravel the intricacies for better health outcomes. I want to be very transparent that using the saliva not only gives us the ability for early diagnostic testing or early diagnosis because it's just right in line with that tissue. This can help us and improve our health outcomes because it can reduce the mortality and morbidity of cancer patients. It can help improve quality of life. The fact that it's non-invasive screening really is exciting for different culture, religious, societal reasons. Some of us, we may not have a religious reason or moral reason or cultural reason that we don't like blood. We just don't like it. You might not be able to find the vein. It's uncomfortable, but you want to know. We need people to get involved with knowing and being proactive in their health because knowing and the earlier that you can detect cancer, the better chance you have of fighting it and beating it.
Correct. Right.
So I'm excited about that part. And I just want to make sure that we are helping people understand that this can increase compliance and accessibility for cancer screening.
If we can reduce the number of biopsies for lung or breast or prostate, I mean, just imagine that, how much we're going to help people. And secondly, how much we're going to save the healthcare system because those things are not cheap. And, they're invasive and they take time out of people's lives. I had a small surgery done a couple of weeks back, but it's put me out for a couple of weeks. And, you don't really include that as part of the process because, you lose work time as well as having to go in and get the surgery done and that type of thing. So, if we can save people those types of things, then, I think we're going to save the healthcare system a lot of money. And my goal has always been to save lives and help people. And if we can do that and save just one life, it's very important.
It's worth it. Now, you mentioned something that is key, and it's something that P23 really focuses on. It is using those salivary biomarkers to provide information about the molecular characteristics and the response of cancer cells to different therapies, such as chemotherapy, radiotherapy, immunotherapy. You can use the saliva to help tailor the treatment to the specific needs and preference of the patient, optimizing the efficacy and safety.
Right.
When you're looking at the potential of not just detecting, but helping to customize that treatment, reduce an adverse drug reaction, and helping to drive the appropriate outcome for care, you're no longer stabbing in the dark. It gives you a very directed roadmap to how this person will respond with this type of cancer.
It's true. And there are applications that are already FDA approved, which basically set the groundwork for other ones to come through. Pharmacogenomics, as you know, saliva plays a really, really big role in pharmacogenomics. So you look at CYP2C9, PGX5FU, for instance, you have 5-fluorouracil. I have a personal interest in that. My mother, this is a really sad story. My mother was only 70 and she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And they basically put her on 5FU, but they didn't test her for whether she responded well or badly to 5FU at the time. And I was kind of furious. But she responded extremely badly and she went into a state of dementia. So the English doctors at the time said, well, the only way we can get her out of this dementia is to give her electric shock treatment. So they gave her electric shock treatment, which caused a stroke. And then a couple of years later, she died. And I think if they'd just done that test, that would have saved my mother's life. I swear that's the case. And it must be the same for a lot of other people. So the more testing we can do up front to verify, and as you said, to also determine what treatment somebody should get, because 50% of the people will respond well to a treatment and the other 50% will not. We have to know which ones. And yeah, you're at the forefront of this, Dr. Montgomery.
Oh, no, I'm joining behind you. I'm just a grasshopper and I'm learning. You're a pupil. I'm a junior pupil. So I'm honored to just be a part and really be driving this discussion.
Do you know one thing we haven't talked about? And, I'm kind of a consultant for another company that's working in the Alzheimer's field. And I'm a co-chair of a salivary working group, which sits under the framework of the Alzheimer's Association. And it's called the Salivary Working Group for Alzheimer's Disease. And it constitutes about 50 people, global people that are the experts in the saliva world that are looking at salivary biomarkers. But the company I'm talking about, they're called Baseline Bioscience. They have intellectual property that we literally brought to them We have some of it, they have the others, but they're looking to develop a point of care application for saliva for Alzheimer's disease, looking at, several biomarkers, which would be amazing, and we can do the same thing with Parkinson's, concussion, and sleep disorders. So, we have intellectual property surrounding those.
Well, probably we didn't get on that because this episode is about cancer genetics. And some of your friends, we might have like a little, panel discussion about Alzheimer's. It's such a complex topic. It's exciting. It's a part of where we are. As we're living longer and we're creating these longer lives, more people are encountering it. I think that is a definite worthwhile conversation to have.
But I think our job for cancer is to reach out to some of these larger companies that are completely blood-based. And, I think they're very blinkered. They think in one direction, which is blood testing, always blood testing or tissue testing. We need to get across the fact that saliva is equally applicable for the tests that they're developing. And, eventually, as we said, that's going to be cheaper. Because you don't have to have a blood test. It's going to help more people. We're going to get more people into treatment earlier. So we just have to convince them. My voice is very small. I mean, you give me very nice compliments, but to be honest, we need people that have strong voices that can basically advocate what we're talking about here today.
We'll continue to build those voices for sure.
Right.
I have enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for coming on. We definitely have to continue this conversation. As we draw this enlightening episode of Demystifying DNA to a close, our episode today focused on unraveling the secrets, cancer, and genetics in saliva-based testing. Dr. Paul Slowey and I, Dr. Tiffany Montgomery, would like to extend our gratitude for your engagement. Today, we've uncovered the critical role the saliva-based testing plays in early cancer detection and the incredible potential it holds in the future of disease prevention. We hope we've broadened your understanding of this cutting-edge field and sparked your curiosity about the incredible potential of genetics to transform healthcare. Remember, the world of genetic research never stands still, consistently unraveling new horizons for our well-being. Continue to explore, stay engaged, and join us again on Demystifying DNA for more enlightening journeys into the fascinating realm of genetics. Here's a friendly reminder. We're with you every step of the way on this journey of discovery. Until next time.
P23. Knowledge, access, power. P23. Wellness and understanding at your fingertips. P23. And that's no cap.